All right, today is October 2nd, and they've dropped another Unearthed Arcana on us. This one is a Psion update. They're updating on the Psion class they introduced back in May, and I'm going to cover the Psion base class. Let's get into it. So this was the designer's insights, and I'm just going to pull out three highlights here. One, they modified the psionic energy dice to be more flexible and easier to regain. I do think that they did a good job of that. The psionic modes have been cut. As painful as that was, like I love the psionic class. It's one of my favorites. I loved it in second edition. It's a big part of Dark Sun. Two things I'm very, very excited about. But it did make this overly complicated, and I think it was too complicated for the design that they're going for with fifth edition. And I do like the design of fifth edition. It is much easier to play. It actually makes it a reasonable play and fun game. And the third highlight is they've um, improved their cantrip progression, so they get a few more cantrips a little earlier, and they've added some spells to their spell list. The cantrips wasn't horrible; it was fine, and it's fine that they've added it, so that's good. They now have the spell progression of cantrip progression of a druid. As far as the spell list, that was their number one problem before, and they've added a few spells, but I'm not going to go over their spell list in detail today because it's just too much. I'll do that one tomorrow. But I think it's still not enough, just from what I've seen so far. Let's keep going. First off, a Psion is a master of psionic power. Psions wield magic and extraordinary powers through the power of thought. They develop their minds as fonts of power that manifest spells and grow stronger over the course of their adventuring careers. You can find everything you need to play one of these psionic powerhouses in the next few sections. So that's what a Psion is. They've got a little more detail on what exactly a Psion is and the history of the Psionic class. I'm not going to go over that. You can read it off the screen if you like. The core traits, you basically have the same traits as like a wizard, right? Intelligence is your primary ability score, D6 for your hit points. Saving throws are intelligence wisdom, same as a wizard. You choose two skills. Um, Perception is a good one to have. Persuasion is a good one to have. So is an insight and investigation. These are good kind of versatility spells, a little bit of social capability. So they've got an interesting spread of skills there. Simple weapon proficiencies only, just like a wizard. No armor training or shield, just like a wizard. Starting equipment, yeah, whatever. Okay, so let's look at the core spell class table. So you can see on the left is the table from May. On the right is the table from October. And the only two real changes, the spell slot progression is exactly the same, so I just cut it off on May. The first change that they made is they had two columns, one for energy dice and one for number of dice, and they just combined it into one column. So that technically is a change, but it's really just being more efficient with space. The second one is what I mentioned earlier about gaining cantrips sooner. So they don't get more cantrips total, they just got them sooner. So instead of getting their third cantrip at level 10, they now get it at level 4. And instead of getting their fourth cantrip at level 14, they now get it at 10. Basically matching what the druid's progression is. All right, level 1 features. First up, spell casting. So there again, the note on the gaining your two more cantrips a little sooner. The second call out I want to make is changing your prepared spells. So they can only change one prepared spell and only when they gain a level in this class, which makes them equal to the sorcerer, warlock, and bard in the ability to change their spells, which is the worst in the game. So that puts them at the bottom. For that kind of category. Is that a huge deal? It's not a huge deal, but it is a little bit of a problem. If you could at least change one per long rest, like the paladin and the ranger, that is a lot better. Okay, and finally, they get this little add-on to their spellcasting section feature called psionic casting, and this is pretty cool. Whenever they cast a psion spell or a spell that counts as a psion spell for them, that has a verbal or material component, they actually don't have those components. There's a caveat on the material component one, which is if the material component is consumed or has a cost specified. So like Find Familiar costs 10 gold pieces that gets consumed. You still have to provide that material component. But for anything else, if it has verbal or material components, those are actually removed. And if those are the only spell components on the spell, then it has no spell components. So nobody can detect you doing it, and nobody can counterspell it. Pretty cool. All right, psionic power. This is the same as it was in May as it is to October. Works the same. And this really is the same thing as what the Rogue Soul Knife and the Fighter Psy Warrior get. Basically, same feature, works the same, progresses at the same level. You get the same number of dice that grow at the same rate. Same thing. Looks great. Probably the one call I want to call for everybody, and this works the same for those, is just to remind you that you get one of your psionic energy die back on a short rest, and you get all of them back on a long rest. I think a lot of people miss that, so I just want to make sure that that's there. All right, and then you get two default features that you can use with your psionic energy dice. They're called telekinetic propel and telepathic connection. So first, let's go over the changes in telekinetic propel. They gave it a non-cost, or a function that doesn't cost any psionic energy dice, and that is basically the same thing as the telekinetic feat, which was you can spend your bonus action, target a creature. They need to make a strength saving throw. If they fail, they're moved 5 feet, either straight toward you or straight away from you. That's it. So it's the same thing as the telekinetic feat, and I like that, right? You know, the Psion should be able to do things that anyone else could get, even if they had a feat, right? So if a fighter takes a telekinetic feat, they shouldn't be better at this telekinetic shoving than a Psion. So yeah, I like that. Now let's go over to the telepathic connection. First up is they increased your just default always on telepathic range from 5 feet to 30 feet. Absolutely, that was needed. It was just ridiculous that they had a 5-foot telepathic range. that was just ridiculous. Is 30 feet enough? I don't know. I mean, you're the Psion, right? You should be the best at telepathy, and 30 feet is really a short range. I think the Thri-kreen has a longer range than this. I think they should get 60 feet at least. And the other change they made was, if you're going to boost it, you can spend a psionic energy die to boost it. It would increase the range, but in the May version, it was only for a number of minutes equal to your Psion level. And in the October version, they said it's a whole hour, which is great. They needed to do that. Is it good enough? No, I don't think so. Right? The Soul Knife Rogue has a feature called Psychic Whispers, and that's one of their default features that they can spend their psionic energy dice on. And that one has a telepathic range of 1 mile. It allows you to have telepathy with multiple creatures simultaneously, equal to your proficiency bonus. I think they may have changed that in 2024, but it's multiple creatures, range of 1 mile, and it lasts a number of hours equal to the roll of your psionic energy die. So this is 1 hour, range of 10 times your psionic energy dice roll, so 10 feet to maybe 60 or higher levels, all the way up to 120 if you're 17th level. So 120 feet, still nothing compared to the Soul Knife Rogue's 1 mile range with multiple creatures simultaneously. So I feel strongly about this one too. The Psion should be the best at telepathy. Like, the Soul Knife Rogue should not be better at telepathy than the Psion. I think they still have more work to do on this one. And I also think they're like missing the theme of what this feature was in second edition. It wasn't just about telepathy. It had an effect that when you contacted somebody, and that's what this is. They're trying to replicate that feature of connecting with, not just having telepathy with somebody, but you're actually connecting with them. And I still don't think they've nailed it. It's not very good. It's weaker than other telepathic features, and I think they missed the theme. All right, and your last level 1 feature is subtle telekinesis. It didn't change at all. You get Mage Hand for free, which helps compensate for having fewer cantrips than everyone else, so that's fine. You can cast it, make it invisible, and it doesn't have somatic components. Those are cool. That comes in handy sometimes. It's not super powerful. It's maybe a little more than a ribbon feature, a little more. I don't know. It's decent. It's decent. All right, level 2. This is where your big feature comes online. That's like the Warlock's Build-A-Bear function, right? Warlocks have their Eldritch invocations, and you can really change what your class is going to be good at, or your build is going to be good at, based on which of those invocations you choose. You can really make warlocks go in different directions. A melee warlock, or a controller, or a different a ranged attacker. And this is kind of like that, right? This allows the Psion. You have these disciplines. You can choose them, and they can really change what your build is going to be good at. So there's a lot of swing on what role will you be good at? Well, it really changes based on this. But in this base feature that's just describing the setup and not each of the options, the only thing that changed, you still get the same number, right? You start at 2. The thing they changed was that you get, instead of getting 2 at level 10 and 2 at level 17, you get 1 at level 5, 1 at level 10, 1 at level 13, 1 at level 17. So you'll still end up with the same. You just get them on a smoother progression, which I like, and I think that's a lot better. The May version was the same progression as what sorcerers had for their meta magic. And two things I don't like about that: it's a long way to go from level 2 to level 10 before you get more of these. Just like the sorcerer, I think that's a really long way to go. But also, there were just too many things where the Psion was just very similar to the sorcerer, and it just felt like, well, you're basically the aberrant mind sorcerer. Like, there's not that much different. So anything they could do to differentiate you from a sorcerer, I appreciate. And yeah, so that's 2 wins on this one. So thumbs up. Um, and in the May version, they had this thing called psionic modes they mentioned that in the design direction. And I already commented a little bit about it. It kind of hurts my soul to remove these, but I agree that they should remove it. It was too complicated, and yeah, this is the right direction. Level 5, Psionic Restoration. So they kind of same kind of concept, but they redesigned it. So previously you had to finish a short rest, and once per day when you finish a short rest, you gain half of your psionic energy dice back. So it kind of worked like arcane recovery. Now it's more like the warlock's mystic magical cunning. That's what it's called, magical cunning, not mystic arcanum, magical cunning, and the monk's uncanny metabolism, where you just spend 1 minute and you get all of your psionic energy dice back, and you can do that once per day. So I think that's a lot better. The psionic energy dice are not nearly as useful as spell slots, and so it shouldn't be as restrictive as the wizard's arcane recovery, right? That's recovering spell slots, and those are a lot more powerful than psionic energy dice. So this is like your secondary resource, and just getting them all back in 1 minute, once a day, makes a lot more sense, and I don't think is in any way overpowered. Not even, it's just fine. It's not super powered. It's just okay. Level 7, Psionic Surge. So this is identical, at least the piece that remained. The piece that's highlighted there in red was removed because that was tied to the Psionic Modes feature, which was deleted from the October version, which is a good thing, frankly. Otherwise, it's identical, and this is a good feature. I like it. Yeah, I like it, and I think it helps the Psionicist, or the Psion, sorry, got the old name stuck in my head. Helps the Psion quite a bit. Level 18, that's a big jump. We went from level 7 to level 18. And at level 18, in the May version, there was not a level 18 feature. So this is new in the October version. And this kind of, it's a common kind of theme of features that they're adding to these classes that have like a secondary resource where you get some back, right? The monk has one of these, and the arcane archer's got one of these, and the battle master's got one of these. So this one is, when you roll initiative, you regain expended uses of your energy dice until you have 4. So you don't have to be at 0. If you're at 0, 1, 2, or 3, you gain back up until you have 4. Yeah, I mean, that's especially on a monk, that's far less useful than it is on a Psion, because the monk gets everything back. First of all, they have more key points. 2, they get them all back on a short rest, so you don't need it as much. But for a class like the Psion, where you've got a lot fewer psionic energy dice, and they only come back fully on a long rest, you get 1 back on a short rest. Getting a few back when you are less than at level 18, that would be, you'd have 12, so you'd get 1/3 of them back. Getting 1/3 of them back when you roll initiative, or up to 1/3 of them back, is pretty good and can really help you. It's not going to make you super powerful, but it'll help give you some of that staying power that you need. Now, you still have your spell slots that are your primary resource, and it's not giving you those back. So I don't think this is unbalanced, and it's not overpowered, it's not underpowered. It's just fine. It's good. And level 18 is pretty late to get it, so they could even maybe move that up to level 15 like the Battle Master. And then level 20, this is a feature. It's called Enkindled Life Force, and the text looks like they changed the text a bit, but really came down to one big change. Previously, it cost you had to expend 2 of your hit point dice, and you would roll them, the hit point dice. Sorry, you wouldn't roll the hit point dice. You would expend 2 hit point dice and roll 2 psionic energy dice and add those whenever you were expending psionic energy dice normally. So you could add that to the result. And it wasn't clear if that expended more psionic energy dice. It kind of just ended there. So in the October version, the last sentence clearly states that that you are expending hit dice to add to it instead of spending more psionic energy dice. So it doesn't cost you more psionic energy dice. So that's clarified. I like that. And what it does is you can actually choose to expend one or two. And then if you expend one hit die, you roll one psionic energy die and add that to whatever you were trying to do with your psionic energy dice. If you expend two, you get a roll two. So give you a little choice. I do think that's better, having a little flexibility. I do think it's better to be clear that it's not expending more psionic energy dice. It feels a little underwhelming for a level 20 feature. It does. I think if they said you could roll one, two, or three, that would be better, or maybe even four. There's at least one feature already in the game like this, the Adept of the Black Robes feat from the Dragonlance campaign setting book, and that would let you roll a number of hit dice up to the spell level you cast, if it's evocation or necromancy, and you could add that to the damage. So if you're casting like a 5th or 6th level spell, you could expend 5 or 6 of your hit dice at once and add that to the roll. This is kind of like that. It lets you can do a few more different things with it, because you can spend psionic energy dice on not just adding damage to something. I guess in those cases, like the one where, like the psionic disciplines, where you're going to boost your ability check, adding one or two more psionic energy dice on top of that is a big deal. But if you're boosting damage, one or two psionic energy dice is actually underwhelming at level 20. So maybe what they should do instead is leave it with one or two hit dice to give you one or two psionic energy dice, and just say if it's adding damage or if it deals damage, then maybe it doubles that, right? So then that way it feels just more impactful at level 20 without being overpowered for the non-damage functions. Yeah, maybe that. But this isn't terrible. I mean, it's good, and it is better than the May version. So overall, here's how I would break it down. There's spellcasting. Now I'm just talking about the spellcasting feature, not the spell list, because the spell list is still not good enough. But I'm going to cover that tomorrow. It's just too much to do today. So spellcasting feature, it is improved. Is it good enough? Yeah, it's good. All right, let's move on to the psionic disciplines. This is an important piece to cover as well. First up, biofeedback. This one was in May. And they did improve it. So previously, you would expend one psionic energy die and roll it. Now you get to choose a number of psionic energy dice up to your intelligence modifier. So at level 3, you could be spending up to 3 psionic energy dice, rolling them for this effect. And once you get your intelligence to 20, now you could roll up to 5 at a time. So that is a big boost. And you get to add your intelligence modifier on top of that. You got to do that in May as well. But the big change is you get to add multiple dice. This only triggers on necromancy and transmutation spells, and what it does is it gives you temporary hit points equal to that, all the psionic energy dice you roll plus your intelligence modifier. So it is a decent chunk. Previously, it was very weak, especially temporary hit points, because they don't stack. So if you're going to get temporary hit points, it's a lot better to have one big chunk than it is to have a lot of little chunks. So that's better. Although it gives you the flexibility to choose, which is great. Now, here's the real gotcha with this feature. Like if this feature was on a wizard for some reason, this would be an excellent feature, because wizards have a lot of transmutation and necromancy spells. The Psion does not. So in that table below there, you can see I've gone through the Psion, the October version of the Psion spell list, and they do not have a lot of spells that qualify. So like cantrips, there are technically 3 spells that qualify, but 0 of those would you cast in combat. And at first level, there's technically 3 that qualify, and only one of those would you reasonably cast in combat. It's the jump spell. The other is like long strider and something else. You would just never cast in combat. At second level, you do a little better. There are 7 spells that technically qualify. Only 5 would you reasonably do in combat. 3 at third level, 1 at fourth level, 2 that you would reasonably do in combat at fifth level, 3 at sixth level that you would reasonably do, 1 at seventh level, 1 at eighth level, and at ninth level there are 2 that you would reasonably cast in combat. And the other one you just wouldn't cast in combat. So this, and as bad as that looks, this actually does better than most of them, of these kinds of psionic disciplines that are tied to spell schools. So let's look at the next one, right? All right, destructive thought, and this is another. This one sounds awesome. Okay, the way it works is you get a in May, when you cast a conjuration or evocation spell and this creature succeeded on their save against your spell, you could cause them some psychic damage. In October, you can do this regardless of the results of the saving throw. So if they succeed or fail, you can add psychic damage to the spell. And on top of that, they also increased the number of psionic energy dice you can roll in the October version. So in the May version, it was one psionic energy die, and you added your intelligence modifier. In the October version, it's a number of psionic energy dice up to your intelligence modifier. Roll all of those, add your intelligence modifier, and they take that psychic damage. So, and again, regardless of whether they save or not. So the feature got a lot better. And I would say, again, if this were on a wizard, that would be excellent. Maybe overpowered. It would be great. But on a Psion, they have so few spells that qualify on their spell list that this is actually a trap, mostly, unless you want to like spec into like one spell, right? They got one cantrip that qualifies. They got 2 first level spells, 1 second level spell, 1 third level spell, 0 fourth and fifth level spells that qualify, 2 sixth, 2 seventh, 1 eighth, and 0 ninth level spells that qualify. So before you choose this and think, it's going to be awesome and feel cool, make sure you double check that you want to be casting those spells specifically, right? And the first and second level spells, one is Life Siphon, one of the new spells, and that one sucks. I did look ahead at that one. The other one is Thunder Wave, which is situational. So now by second level, you finally get a spell that you might reasonably cast on a regular basis in combat, which is Shatter. But Shatter is not considered a great spell. And you're going to be counting on that to be using this effect to add damage. So it's, you're adding a decent damage effect on top of a kind of a bad spell. If that damage affected everybody affected by the spell, I actually think that would be great on Shatter, but it doesn't. It's only one target who is affected by the spell. So you cast Shatter, you get weak damage on a bunch of creatures or a few creatures, and then one of them takes extra psychic damage. At third and fourth level, that's going to feel great, but after that, that's going to feel pretty disappointing. Your third level spell is one of the new spells, and I forget what it's called, the Bleeding Darkness, I think, or something like that. That one is, I think, disappointing as well. So putting this on a disappointing spell, again, not great. And on top of that, that Bleeding Darkness is a concentration spell. It's very much like Moonbeam, and this effect only triggers when you cast the spell, not every round thereafter when you deal damage. So you would still cast this once and then have to fall back to Shatter to trigger this again on future rounds if you wanted to keep triggering this. Because you can only concentrate on one spell, unless you want to keep recasting this 1 third level spell and wasting your concentration, which makes no sense. And then you don't even have a 4th and 5th level spell. So you don't get, so you're relying on Shatter and this Bleeding Darkness all the way until you get to level 11 before you get to try this with some other spell. So this would be great. The spell list makes this a thumbs down. This is a bad feature until they fix that spell list. And frankly, this one is the same. So it used to be called Swift Precognition. Now it's called Bolstering Precognition. They made a similar change, or no, not a similar change. They actually completely redesigned this one. So it was basically a Quicken spell was the idea here. And again, too much like the Sorcerer's Meta Magic. I'm glad they redesigned it. So the way it works now is a little bit more like Bardic Inspiration, where you can boost somebody else's D20 roll by the amount of one of your Psionic Energy dice. And I think this would be, I don't know. I don't think this is a good design. I mean, I think it's better than what they had just because I like getting away from the sorcerer features. The problem is that if you're going to boost one of your allies or yourself's roll, do you want to be casting an abjuration and divination spell to trigger that? You don't always want to be casting those spells to trigger that. So there'll be a lot of times where you're like, I really want to boost somebody else's roll, but there isn't a spell I want to cast to pull it off. Which also begs the question, do they mean for this to work on cantrips? Or are they going to apply that usual clause they add to most of these kind of effects where they say it only triggers when you expend a spell slot, which they don't have here. But if they put that on here, that really weakens all of these, and it wouldn't work on cantrips or free castings of spells. So that's a big question mark if they're going to add that. But this maybe isn't too bad. If this, in a current version, there's 2 cantrips you can use this with, right? You got Blade Ward and True Strike. And if you want to trigger this and just, True Strike nothing or Blade Ward for no reason on yourself just to trigger this boost you can give to yourself or an ally, that works just fine. So whether or not this feature is just fine as it is really depends on whether or not they're going to add that clause that excludes cantrips and free castings. But let's look at this. This kind of suffers from what I was describing on the last one, which is, yeah, there's technically 6 first level spells that qualify. Only 2 of those might you cast in combat. 5 second level spells that qualify. Only 1 of those would you reasonably cast in combat. At 3rd level, there's 6 spells that qualify. 0 of those would you regularly cast in combat. So this one's kind of a bit of a bait and switch. Like, you think you have a bunch of spells that qualify and are going to work with this, and then you look at them, you're like, well, I wouldn't want to cast that. Like, I'm not going to just blow a 3rd level spell slot to cast Dispel Magic if there's nothing to dispel in order to trigger this. Right? That goes back to casting a cantrip, which, again, this is a fine feature if they allow that, which it currently does. And then, yeah, you can keep looking at the rest of the table. There's 0 at 7th level at all that qualify, and 0 at 5th, 6th, and 9th level that, there's some that qualify at those levels, none that you would reasonably cast in combat on any regular basis. So, all right, and the last of these, and I kind of bunch these ones together because there's 4 of them, and each 4 of these psionic disciplines that buff 2 spell schools each. So there's 8 spell schools, so there's 4 of these psionic disciplines, right? So this is the last one. It's called insinuation, and it works basically the same. This one works on enchantment and illusion spells, and previously you would expend 2 psionic energy dice, roll 1, and then 1 target of your spell would have to subtract that from their saving throw. So they changed it. Now you just expend 1, you just roll 1, and now they subtract half of that roll rounded up from its saving throw. I think this is better. I think it's less confusing. So I think it was confusing, and it would have been kind of messy for players to remember that in this case you expend 2 and roll 1. So I think that's better, less confusing. And I don't think it's that much of a debuff to make it roll half round up, right? Or subtract half round up. And actually, rolling the whole die would be a lot on a saving throw. So one thing that they really need to clarify is whether or not this is before or after they roll the save. It looks like when you cast the spell in its current version, you have to declare you're doing this before the target rolls the save. And that would be one thing I think that I would like to see them change, is just change it to say only have it trigger when the target succeeds at the saving throw. That's when this triggers, so that you're never having those feel bad moments where you tried to use it and it ended up being a total waste because they rolled so low it didn't matter, and then you just blew a psionic energy die for nothing. And this is one where it actually benefits from a lot of spells on your spell list, right? There's a cantrip, Friends. You might want to use this on a Friends cantrip. There's 6 first level spells, 9 second level spells, 5 at level 4, 5 at level 5. There are a lot of spells this is going to work on. There isn't anyone in 7th, but you have so many other spells at other spell levels that I think it's okay. And I think this is one of the better options simply because your spell list lines up with it. And these are the kind of spells you're going to want to be dropping people or lowering people's saving throw on, right? All of your enchantment and illusion spells. So, your hold persons, your Tasha's Hideous Laughter, your sleep spells, like all of those spells are benefiting from this. And those are the spells that you want to benefit from something like this. So I think the design is good. I think everything works. It would just be a little bit better if they had a trigger when the target succeeds instead. Moving on. These 3 I'm grouping together. These are all 3 psionic disciplines that boost ability checks, right? So Devilish Tongue was all the influence action ability checks. Expended Awareness is the search action. Tactical Mind is the study action. And those all work the same. They all changed in exactly the same way, which is they modified it so that you only roll, that the die is only expended if you succeed. So if you still fail, it's not expended. This works a lot like how the Soul Knife Rogue feature works, where they get to apply this to any skill. They get to do this, and they don't have to limit it to the influence action, search action, study action. They get to do this on any skill check they make that they're proficient with. They can boost it with their psionic ability die or psionic energy die, and again, they don't expend it unless they succeed. So it's good that they added these here. I think that's a good change. And then they changed the name of Tactical Mind to Observant Mind, which I'm glad they changed it, because Tactical Mind is a fighter feature, and I think it's always better to not cause confusion in players and DMs, right? Don't make it harder on any of us when you name two features the same, but they are very different features on very different classes. That being said, Observant Mind still misses the mark. It's kind of confusing because you have the Observant, the Observant, I think is that what's called? The Observant Feat, and that boosts your search action. So this is going to be confusing still because it's going to make people think it's boosting your search action, but in this case, it's your study action. Just call it Analytical Mind. It's not fancy, it's not exciting. It means kind of what you're doing, right? You're analytical. It's the study action, which is what you're doing. So that works on investigation and history and arcana. Call it Analytical Mind, guys. Come on. Inerrant Aim. This one lets you spend a psychic energy die to boost your attack roll. It didn't change at all between the two versions, and I think this one is just fine as it is. Just the one caveat is this is a trap unless you heavily spec into being some sort of attacker, right? Which is not your thing. Like you don't have a lot of attack roll spells, and you're not built to be any kind of a martial unless you unless you take the metamorph subclass. So I don't know. They should put like an asterisk on this one and say, hey, you should only look at this. Do not consider this one unless you take the metamorph subclass. Like, I don't know. Or just make this part of the metamorphs. Make this part of the metamorph subclass itself so that you don't have players accidentally taking this and then having those feel bad moments of, gee, I wasted one of my two disciplines on something that doesn't even make sense for me. Psionic Backlash. All right, so this one existed in May. They changed it. It used to be roll 2 psionic energy, so you'd expend 1 and roll 2. So that was confusing on its own. And then you would add and then you would subtract that from damage you take, and the target would then have to make a wisdom saving throw or take psychic damage equal the same amount that you rolled. Kind of weird, kind of underpowered. It didn't make a lot of sense. And they changed it. So now you expend 1 psionic energy dice, roll it, then you double it. So you roll 1, double it, and then add your intelligence modifier. So that's a significant boost to this, and subtract that from the damage you take. So that's a lot better. There's a lot higher chance, so a lot lower chance of feel bad moments where you just roll 2, a total of 2, and you wasted your reaction and a psionic energy die to reduce the damage by 2. Now you're looking at a minimum of 5, right? Your intelligence, you should start with a +3 intelligence modifier. So the least you could roll is, a 1 on each die plus a 3. So you're at least reducing damage by 5, but probably more likely reducing the damage by like 12 on average. Sorry, 10 on average to start with, at low levels. So as you level up, that's going to increase as your psionic energy die increases. So it's a lot better. And that means the target's also going to take a lot more psychic damage. Is this good enough? So this one was interesting because before you didn't have a good reaction to protect yourself, and they've added shield to your the Psion spell list. So now whenever you're hit, you need to decide between, and you should definitely take shield. You have no armor, and you have a D6 hit dice. You should definitely take shield and mage armor, right? Okay, so you've got shield and you've got this, and you got to decide, well, which reaction should I take? Well, most of the time, it's just better to not be hit at all, right? Instead of reducing the damage. So you should just use shield if you have a spell slot. I guess if you don't have a spell slot and you really want to be defensive and make sure you're not dying, then you can have this as a backup. I would not spend one of my choices of psionic disciplines on this. I would just take shield and rely on that because you only get 2 and you get a third one at level 5. So you don't get a lot of these. I would not waste one on this. And probably because that was one of the problems with the 2014 version of the Warlock. They had all of these Eldritch invocations, and a bunch of them were garbage. And it wasn't immediately apparent to players which ones were garbage. And so you'd have players taking these and be like, oh, well, that I never use it, and it's lame. And you can only switch one every time you level up. And so I would just like to see them just, instead of trying to cram more of these in, just get rid of the ones that are garbage, or keep working on it until it's not garbage, right? Like, and by garbage, I mean, it has to be good enough that this would be one of the 2 disciplines you choose at level 2, right? You get 2. And if this isn't good enough to ever qualify as one of the top 2 that you might even consider, then it needs more work, or you should remove it. Psionic Guards. This one didn't change at all. It's on theme. It gives you basically immunity to charmed and frightened conditions, advantage on intelligence saving throws. It's kind of weird in how it works. You have to trigger it by expending expending a psionic energy die at the start of your turn. It's a little clunky. It makes sense that you have it, and I would like to see them tweak it more. And I have similar thoughts to the last psionic discipline, which is it needs more oomph. because I don't think this qualifies as being, I wouldn't really consider this as one of those two disciplines I'm taking at second level. Where would this fall on my list? Probably, I don't know. I wouldn't consider it until after I've got 3 or 4 psionic disciplines. I might think about this as the 5th one. And the last one, I wouldn't think about, I don't know, until after that. So with this kind of design of features, it's tricky because they all need to be so close to on par with each other that they are equally enticing. And if they're not equally enticing and a couple of them are just dramatically better in so many ways and so much more applicable, then you really haven't designed it well, because you don't have 10 options, you have 2 options, because the 2 options are so much better. And they haven't nailed that balance yet with these. So needs more work. And the last one, Sharpened Mind. This is kind of where they got rid of those psionic modes. And one of those modes, the 2 modes were attack mode and defense mode. So they kind of got rid of psionic modes and then took that attack mode concept and just put it into this psionic discipline and called it Sharpened Mind. So the bypassing psionics is okay. You get resistance psychic damage and you get a bypass psychic damage. Bypass psychic resistance. So that's okay. You don't actually do a lot of psychic damage, and there's not, there's more, you're going to take more psychic damage in 2024 than you did in 2014, but it's not a huge deal either. So that's kind of a pretty small feature. And then the attack mode feature is whatever you rolled on that die when you initiated this, that you get you note that number and keep it for a whole minute. Whatever that number is, you can, once on each of your turns, whenever you're rolling psychic damage, you can replace one of the rolls from the damage that you deal with that number. And if you rolled a 1, you're never going to use it. And that bothers me. I think they got to tweak that. The attack mode portion of this is not good. I mean, part of the time it's good if you roll the max number, you roll a 6 or the 8 or whatever your max number is at your level. And it's actually going to feel probably pretty good, especially when you're at higher levels and it's a 12, right? Because then you can replace D6s from your synaptic static with a 12, a single D6 from your synaptic static with a 12. But even then, you're talking about a maximum increase on average. Even if you got that lucky, you'd be increasing the damage once per turn by 11, right? And that's, best case scenario. And so this is really swingy, and unfortunately, you're stuck with it. Because you roll it once, and then whatever that roll is, if you got unlucky, you're stuck with that for the whole minute. I think they need to revisit this. It's not good enough yet. Yeah. All right. And here's how, I would rate each one of these. And overall, the Psion class, it's somewhere between, as a whole, this green thumbs up and the yellow, kind of in the middle.